From floor plans to 5-year plans, business to finding balance, I'm Ashley Bruggeman, an interior designer with a love for beautiful living and a belief that style and substance go hand in hand. I'm pulling back the curtain on design, resilience, and entrepreneurship. Expect real talk, refined tips, and just the right mix of polish and personality. So pour something sweet and join me for a thoughtful conversation with a generous helping of charm and circumstance. Hey, I'm Ashley Bruggeman, and this is Charm and Circumstance. Today's episode is for anyone standing at the edge of a decision that feels big, scary, or impossible. Whether it's in business, family, career, or your next personal pivot, there's often a moment that fear starts to sound like logic. We're going to talk about how to make big decisions with clarity, confidence, and without letting fear sit in the driver's seat. Let's get into it. Some decisions can feel as risky as skydiving. Did you know the average adult makes around 35,000 conscious decisions each day? Most of these are the decisions that we have to make every day, like what we're going to eat for dinner tonight and what we're going to wear. But of course, we're often faced with the big decisions like, do I take this job? Should I stay in this relationship? Is this the right house? Do I keep these kids? Just kidding. Of course, yes, you do keep the kids. We fear making the wrong decision more than we fear standing still. It's so much easier to procrastinate and avoid making a decision over taking the risk of making the wrong one. And then if we do make the wrong decision, well, then we have to live with the consequences, and who wants to do that? It feels so much safer to put off making the decision. But is that really the best thing to do? Or is it just the illusion of having some sort of control? The illusion of control is waiting for that perfect clarity that rarely comes. I can't control the situation, but I can control how long I ignore it. Have you ever been told that you have a tendency to grasp for control? I certainly have, and I certainly do. Of course, the reality is that we're really never in control. It's all nothing more than an attempt to convince ourselves that we have a say and that we're in charge of any given situation. What if I fail? What if I'm not who I hope I am? I think these fears, at least for me, come from an identity problem. I begin to allow my failures and my fears to define me instead of seeing them as just one thing that happened in my life or one emotion that I'm having, but none of it's actually who I am. As I think about a time when I've made a decision that felt paralyzing, I realize that more often it's when I've made the decision to leave or end my involvement with something or someone more than to start something new. I'm usually the one to jump head first into new things without spending too much time thinking things all the way through. If a door is just barely cracked open, I'll just push it wide open, and this is not always a great thing. As far as making big decisions that felt paralyzing, I've spent years in toxic situations that were doomed from the start. The decision to finally walk away took me a long, long time. So now I ask myself 4 basic questions when I need to make a big leap. And so I hope that these 4 questions can help you as well. So the first question is, what would I do if I trusted myself? If I had full confidence that things would work out, would I even consider not taking the leap? Would my excitement and positivity completely overtake my fears and anxiety? Yes, it is a lot of pressure to trust yourself that much, but with responsibility comes confidence. If you can trust yourself enough to take the leap, just having one person that believes in you, it's you, by the way, will just continue to bolster your confidence. This is, however, an active trust, meaning that it's a constant process. No one has 100% confidence in themselves all the time. Well, maybe some people do, but that's probably qualifies them for a diagnosis, and that's a totally different podcast altogether. So in these moments of self-doubt, we have to take action to get our heads on straight and correct our thoughts to be encouraging and positive and to squash the doubts. So the second question that I ask myself is, if fear wasn't part of the equation, what would feel like the right decision? In other words, if you had nothing to lose, what would be your decision? I feel like this one takes some effort to get yourself in the right headspace. I mean, to even begin thinking about a decision without fear of any kind playing a part requires the ability to really compartmentalize. But I think every single one of us are capable of doing it. So try it. The third question that I ask myself is, am I waiting for permission or am I ready to give it to myself? If you're waiting for permission, who is it going to come from and why? Are you capable of giving yourself permission to leap? Do you see how these are so closely tied to one another? Trusting yourself means you're willing to give yourself permission. And if fear isn't in the equation, then that brings us to question number 4. What's the worst case scenario? And could I survive it? I love this question. It's so powerful. It takes your worst fear and helps you determine if it's actually as awful as you think it is. You basically get to take the power away from your fear. And the answer is probably always, at least 99.9%, yes, you would survive the worst case scenario. Most of us overestimate how devastating failure would be and underestimate what staying stuck is already costing us. Are you stuck somewhere right now? Where is it? And why are you stuck? Is it because you don't trust yourself enough, or because your fear has taken charge, or because you've taken your own power away by waiting for someone else to give you permission to take the leap? Keep thinking through these questions if this is where you find yourself right now. Some of these questions focus in on pulling out the illogical aspects of our thinking or fears, which brings up the whole role of logic versus intuition in our decision making. Making a decision doesn't require eliminating all risk. It means knowing what kind of risk you're willing to live with. I think this is where we often get stuck. We think there's some alternate reality where we can actually mitigate all risk. And then as soon as we eliminate it, we'll be ready to leap. But that's no leap. A leap requires risk. And I hate risk just as much as anyone, but this is where my faith comes in and helps tremendously. I know I've got someone to catch me if I fall, and it's the only reason I'm able to leap most of the time. And data is important, but your gut matters too. So especially as women, we're often conditioned to override our intuition, but sometimes the answers don't come until we're still and quiet, and only then can we hear our own intuition speaking. The data may present one way, but if your intuition is telling you something different, that can be more impactful than the data. So what if we gather the facts, then listen to the whisper? Both logic and intuition play vital roles in taking that leap, but we have to only allow each as much space as it deserves. If we give logic full control, then we'd probably never take any risks. And if we let intuition take over, we could take on too much risk. I think allowing both of these their rightful role in my decisions has guided me well, but there are always the outliers. Like the time I listened to my gut and ignored all logic and took my then 17-year-old son to Europe for spring break. It was actually an early graduation present because I had Delta credit and it was going to expire. So I decided that we would go to London, Paris, and Amsterdam. And that way he'd get to visit 3 different countries in the span of just over a week. It was this itinerary or travel through Italy, but again, I thought it would be so much cooler for him to see 3 different countries on his first trip to Europe. And you have to keep in mind that my son knows more history, specifically regarding our military and wars, than most adults. So I figured that he'd be all in on the Churchill exhibits and tours and the fact that we were in the places where World War II actually took place. But no, he had zero interest in any of it. By the time we were in Paris, I had a cold and the weather was gloomy, of course, and we were waiting in line for a while to go through security to get into the Louvre, even though the admission times were all controlled in an attempt to maintain some level of crowd control ever since COVID. My son was over it, and we hadn't even made it inside. He asked what the point of walking through a museum and looking at old paintings was. Yeah, we saw the Mona Lisa, of course. We stood right in front of the Van Goghs at the Musée d'Orsay. He couldn't have cared less. This trip wasn't cheap, and it was a huge splurge for me, and something I'd been looking forward to going and doing with him for a long time, so I was crushed. And the week after we got home, he went on a school trip to Chicago where he visited the Art Institute of Chicago as part of the itinerary. Of course, he didn't choose that on his own. And while he was on this trip, he posted a picture of himself standing in front of a painting on his Instagram. I was pissed, but I didn't say a word. Then this child comes home, and out of his bag, he pulls a matted print of this same painting, and I lost it. He stood in front of all these big paintings in Europe, and ones that I paid a pretty penny for him to see in person. And then this. What is it about the Seurat painting titled A Sunday on Le Grand Jatte? He said it was in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I could have died right there. What else could I expect from a 17-year-old boy? The sensible choice would have been to invest in a different trip, a different experience for this kid's graduation present. But I wanted to show him the things that I had seen instead of letting it be all about him. So, lesson learned. Make the sensible choice next time. What's interesting is that I've found that before I take the leap and make the decision, I don't have all the answers of what it'll look like on the other side. I have no idea how easy or hard the actual task will be that I'm signing up for. But then once I take the leap, which we'll call the first step, then the second step appears, and then the third, and so on. Decisions are activators. Once you decide, the path starts to shape. And that's how it was with starting my business. That's how it was with starting this podcast, and it continues to be. That's how it's been in making decisions to walk away from things as well. One step at a time, one day at a time, clarity comes with each step. And action creates momentum, and with it, confidence. Every small step gets you closer to where you're going. Even when things don't go as planned, you move, you learn, you evolve. Are you the type of person that has regrets? See, I'm not. Do I wish I'd done things differently in the past? Of course I do. But I don't regret it in the sense that I wish I could do it all over again. I've grown and learned more through my mistakes than I will ever through my success. And don't you feel that way too? There are countless unexpected gifts that have come from saying yes to a big leap. I bet you've experienced these as well. About 10 years ago, I decided I wanted to start running. And I really don't even remember how or why it happened, but I think it had just always been something that was intimidating to me, and I despise being intimidated by anything. So just for reference, I'm an Enneagram 8, so if you know, you know. So I did all the normal things as I started learning how to train to run a 5K. It feels so ridiculous now to think about it. And by the way, if you've never before run or have the idea that a 5K is completely intimidating, I get it. I can also tell you that you can absolutely do it. So anyways, I start running and training like 6 days a week, working up my strength and endurance, running intervals, which I loved because I had no endurance. And I ran my first 5K and was so proud of myself because my goal was just literally to finish. That's it. And then I ran a 10K and it was tough, and I definitely stopped to walk several times, but I continued being consistent with my training, and I had zero plans to run anything beyond a 10K. That was just not in the cards. No way was I capable. I just wanted to be consistent in running, just like 2 to 3 miles a day. I could do that. So at the same time that I was going through my running phase, we'll call it, I was also volunteering with a local organization that ministered to women who had been sex trafficked and all that comes with that, which is a lot, as you can imagine. These women had mountains to overcome in their healing process, and so many of them were very successful at it. They were overcoming mindset issues, core beliefs, addictions, you name it. They did not have an easy road. It's a lot like running a race, actually. So one of these women decided that she wanted a physical goal to work toward as she worked on the mental and emotional goals. What do you think her goal was? To run a half marathon, of course. And who do you think they asked to run it with her? Well, me, of course. So I could have said no, but that would make me a terrible human being. So I thought, here's a woman overcoming all odds And she's willing to run 13.1 miles to prove to herself that she can do it. So shouldn't I be able to do that? One would hope. So I reluctantly said yes and started training for the half marathon I thought I would never run. And when I tell you I was scared to death, that doesn't even begin to explain my terror. Like, I remember crying when I was running, training for this. I Googled everything that could go wrong. What's the slowest half marathon finish? What happens if you go too slow? Have people been kicked out of a half marathon for going too slow? And I know if you are or ever have been a runner, you're probably thinking, what on earth is wrong with her? But you have to understand that this was so far from my wheelhouse, and my fear was totally running the show. So both my friend and I set our goals to just finish this race alive. That was literally our goal. And I would be thrilled with myself if I could do that. I'd read where you should eat a banana before the race and after the race. So I literally brought my own bunch of bananas to the race. For those of you, again, who don't run or have never been to a race, they have bananas there. Hundreds, if not thousands of them, as soon as you run through the chute at the finish. So by now you're understanding my level of anxiety. So the race starts, and my friend and I started out together, but we'd already agreed that we wouldn't hold one another back. So our only plan was to finish alive, of course. And if that was separate, so be it. So we did have to separate, of course, because a mile or two in, my anxiety had now torn my stomach up so badly that I had to visit the porta potties. And my friend, who at this point is clearly maybe a little bit more sane than me, keeps going and finishes the race before me. But I did finish, and I did have a banana. And then I finished several more 5Ks, and then get this, 2 more half marathons before I decided that my knees needed a break. I had accomplished what I'd set out to do. I'd proven to myself that I could do it, even though I had no idea how that was going to happen. And that's the thing I've started to realize in these big decisions to move forward. I'm not going to have all the answers. I'm not going to know how to do half of the things that I need to know, but I can figure it out. How? I'm not even sure about that, but somehow it'll happen. And sometimes your goal can just simply be to finish alive. Are there any big decisions that you're trying to make right now? Ones that you have no idea how things will work if you try this one thing? Could you just try it and maybe even just make your goal to finish alive? Big decisions aren't easy, but they're often the doorway to your next great chapter. If you're in that waiting place right now, I hope today's episode gave you courage, clarity, or at the very least, company. If this resonated with you, I would love to hear what you're navigating. You can find me on Instagram at Charm and Circumstance, and my firm's on Instagram at Ashley Morgan Interiors. And if you know someone who's facing their own big decision, share this episode with them. Until next time, beautiful friend. Thanks for joining me on Charm and Circumstance. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow along on Instagram, because charm is personal and circumstance is what you make of it.